The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, 8 days after our divorce was finalized. I found it wedged in my mailbox between a grocery store flyer and a credit card offer, the expensive cream cardstock, immediately recognizable as something significant. My hands were full of groceries, my mind occupied with mundane thoughts about what to make for dinner now that I was cooking for one instead of two. I almost threw it away with the junk mail. I wish I had. My name was handwritten on the envelope in elegant script that I didn't recognize. No return address, which should have been my first warning. I set down the grocery bags on my kitchen counter and opened it, expecting perhaps a wedding invitation from a distant cousin or former colleague. What I found made my hands go numb. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of David Morrison and Lily Chen. The ceremony had already happened. This wasn't an invitation to attend. It was an announcement, a declaration, perhaps even a taunt. David Morrison was my ex-husband. We'd been married for 16 years before he filed for divorce 9 months ago, citing the standard irreconcilable differences that mean everything and nothing. The process had been ugly, drawn out, and emotionally devastating. He'd fought me on every asset, questioned every expense, made me prove the value of 16 years of partnership in a way that reduced our entire marriage to a spreadsheet of who contributed what. And now, 1 week after the judge signed our final decree, he was married to someone named Lily Chen. Someone I'd never heard him mention. Someone who apparently had been waiting in the wings while we were still technically husband and wife. The photo tucked inside the invitation showed them on a beach at sunset. David in a white linen suit that I'd never seen him wear during our marriage, his arm around a woman who looked impossibly young. She was tiny, barely reaching his shoulder, with long dark hair and delicate features. She wore a simple white dress that billowed in the ocean breeze, her face tilted up toward him with an expression of adoration that made my stomach turn. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to process what I was seeing. David was 52. This woman looked maybe 25, possibly younger. The age gap was jarring enough, but what really bothered me was the timeline. You don't meet someone, fall in love, and get married in 8 days. Which meant David had been planning this while we were still married. While he was sleeping in our bed and eating meals I prepared and lying to my face about working late. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to call him. He answered on the third ring. "Rebecca," he said, and I heard wariness in his voice. He knew why I was calling. "You got married." I kept my voice level, refusing to give him the satisfaction of hearing me break. "I was going to tell you. When, after the honeymoon. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. That's why I sent the announcement." The audacity of that statement left me momentarily speechless. "You didn't want me to hear it from someone else, so you sent me a wedding photo. David, we've been divorced for 8 days. 8 days. How long have you been seeing her? That's not really your business anymore." "It absolutely is my business. You were my husband for 16 years. I deserve to know how long you were cheating on me." "I never cheated on you," he said, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into his tone. "Lily and I didn't start our relationship until after I filed for divorce. That's a very specific distinction. What about before you filed? How long were you planning to leave me while still pretending everything was fine? I'm not having this conversation." I called it quits because we weren't working. I met someone who makes me happy. I'm sorry if the timing bothers you, but I'm not going to apologize for moving on with my life. The timing bothers me because it's suspicious, David. Normal people don't get married 1 week after their divorce is final unless they were planning it for a while. Normal people at least pretend to have a mourning period for their 16-year marriage. There's nothing suspicious about it. Lily and I fell in love. When you know you know. How old is she? Another pause. What does that matter? How old is she, David? 28. I laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. You're 52 years old and you married a woman young enough to be your daughter. Do you see how that looks? She's an adult. She can make her own choices. And honestly, Rebecca, your jealousy is unattractive. We're divorced. I'm allowed to marry whoever I want. I'm not jealous, I said, and I meant it. I felt many things looking at that wedding photo, but jealousy wasn't one of them. What I felt was closer to revulsion, mixed with a growing sense that something was very, very wrong. I'm concerned. The timeline doesn't make sense. The age gap is disturbing. And frankly, you don't look like a man in love in that photo. You look like a man who won something. This conversation is over, David said. I called you out of courtesy, but I don't owe you explanations about my life anymore. I hope you can find a way to be happy for me. He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, staring at the wedding announcement on my counter, trying to understand what had just happened. Something about this entire situation felt off, like looking at a painting that's hanging slightly crooked. You know something isn't right even if you can't immediately articulate what. I picked up the photo again, studying it more carefully this time. David looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes more pronounced, his hair grayer at the temples. The beach setting was tropical, probably somewhere in the Caribbean or Mexico. They'd gone on a destination wedding, just the two of them apparently, given the intimate setting. But it was Lily who drew my attention. Her face was partially obscured by windblown hair, her eyes hidden behind large sunglasses. What I could see was delicate, almost ethereal. She had high cheekbones and full lips, her skin luminous in the golden hour light. She wore no visible jewelry except for what looked like a thin gold band on her left hand. There was something familiar about her face. I couldn't place it, but looking at her profile triggered a sense of recognition that I couldn't explain. Had I seen her somewhere before? Had she been at a party we'd attended, a restaurant where we'd eaten, somewhere in our social circle? I pulled out my laptop and opened Facebook, searching for Lily Chen. The name was common enough that dozens of profiles appeared. I scrolled through them, looking for a face that matched the woman in the photo. Nothing. I tried Instagram with the same result. If David's new wife had social media, she either used a different name or her privacy settings were locked down tight. Next, I searched for David's Facebook page. He'd blocked me months ago during the divorce, but I could still see his profile picture and cover photo. The profile picture was the same one he'd had for years, a professional headshot from his company website. But the cover photo was new. David and Lily at what looked like an outdoor cafe, her face once again partially hidden by sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat. The comments on his page were visible even though the posts weren't. "Congratulations," wrote someone named Mark. "You two look so happy together," said a woman named Jennifer. "Beautiful couple," commented another person. I felt sick. Our mutual friends were congratulating him on his marriage to a woman barely older than our non-existent children would have been. And none of them seemed to find anything odd about the timeline or the age gap. Or maybe they did, and they just weren't saying it publicly. I called my best friend Allison, who'd been my main support through the divorce. "Tell me you're sitting down," I said when she answered. "Why, what happened?" "David got married to a 28-year-old named Lily Chen. The wedding was last week." Silence, then. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me correctly. 1 week after our divorce was final, he married someone who could be his daughter." That's— Allison paused, clearly trying to find appropriate words. "That's remarkably fast, even for David. It's not just fast, it's suspicious. You don't fall in love and get married in 8 days. Which means he was planning this while we were still married. Did you confront him?" "He claims they didn't start dating until after he filed for divorce." Which, even if true, means he met her and filed for divorce within a very short window. Either way, I was being replaced before I even knew I was expendable. "I'm so sorry, Beck. That's devastating." "It's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I can't shake this feeling that I've seen her before. Her face is familiar, but I can't place it. It's driving me crazy. Maybe she just has one of those faces. Some people look generically familiar." "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. The recognition I felt looking at Lily's face was too specific, too certain. I knew her from somewhere, I just couldn't remember where. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed scrolling through old photos on my phone, looking for any evidence that Lily had been in our orbit before David filed for divorce. I went back months, examining backgrounds of photos from parties and dinners and work events, looking for her face in crowds. Nothing. But the feeling of recognition wouldn't leave me. It gnawed at me like an itch I couldn't scratch, growing more insistent the more I tried to dismiss it. I knew this woman. I was certain of it. But from where? I got up at 3 in the morning and made coffee, then spread the wedding announcement and photo on my kitchen table. In the harsh overhead light, I examined every detail. The beach looked like somewhere I'd never been. The dress was simple and unfamiliar. There was nothing in the background that gave me any context. But then I noticed something I'd missed before. Partially visible on Lily's right wrist, beneath the sleeve of her dress, was what looked like a small tattoo. I grabbed a magnifying glass from my junk drawer and examined it more closely. It was a tiny symbol, possibly Chinese characters, delicate and precisely done. I pulled up Google and searched for small Chinese character tattoos. Thousands of images appeared. I scrolled through them, looking for anything similar. After 20 minutes, I found something close. A tattoo representing double happiness, a traditional Chinese symbol associated with marriage and good fortune. That symbol triggered something in my memory. I'd seen it before, but not on Lily. I'd seen it somewhere else in some other context. But where? I opened my laptop and started going through my email archives, searching for any mention of Chinese symbols or tattoos or anything that might connect. Nothing came up. I searched my photo albums again, this time looking specifically at wrists and hands in background shots. Still nothing. But the certainty was growing. I knew Lily Chen. I'd seen that face before. And whatever the connection was, it was important enough that my subconscious was practically screaming at me to remember. I spent the rest of the night researching. I looked up David's company, examining employee directories and LinkedIn profiles, searching for any Lily Chen who might have worked there. I searched local gyms, coffee shops, restaurants, anywhere we'd frequented that might employ young women. I checked the alumni directories of local universities, thinking maybe she'd been a student somewhere we'd volunteered or attended events. By dawn, I had nothing concrete, just a growing headache and a certainty that I was missing something obvious. I called in sick to work that morning, something I rarely did. I needed time to think, to figure out why this woman's face was so familiar. I made more coffee and returned to my laptop, this time searching through my text messages and WhatsApp conversations, looking for any mention of a Lily or someone matching her description. That's when I found it. Buried in a conversation with David from 14 months ago, back when things between us had seemed normal, was a text thread I'd completely forgotten about. I'd been complaining about a difficult project at work, and David had responded, "Don't let it stress you out. Remember what my intern always says, perspective is everything." His intern. 14 months ago, David had mentioned an intern. I'd never thought anything of it. His company regularly took on summer interns from local universities. It was part of their recruitment pipeline. But what if that intern had been Lily Chen? I searched through more messages, looking for any other mention of an intern. I found one more from 12 months ago. "The intern made the coffee today, and it's actually drinkable for once. Maybe we should hire her full-time." My hands started shaking. I pulled up David's company website and navigated to their staff page. There, among the junior employees, was a photo that made my vision blur. Lily Chen, junior associate, hired full-time 8 months ago. 8 months ago. Which meant she'd been working at David's company since shortly before he filed for divorce. I zoomed in on her staff photo, comparing it to the wedding photo. Same delicate features, same luminous skin. But in the staff photo, she wore professional attire and her hair was pulled back, making her look slightly older and more serious. This was definitely the same woman. David had married his employee, a woman 24 years younger than him who had worked under his supervision. A woman whose career advancement depended on his goodwill. A woman who had been in a position of professional vulnerability to him. The power dynamic made me nauseous. But more than that, I was now certain that David had been lying about the timeline. He'd met Lily Chen at least 14 months ago when she was an intern. He'd been mentioning her in casual conversation, probably testing my reaction, seeing if I'd notice him talking about a younger woman. And then he'd hired her full-time, kept her close, and at some point, their relationship had crossed the line from professional to personal. Had he filed for divorce because he'd fallen in love with his intern? Or had he been planning it even before that, seeing an opportunity to trade in his middle-aged wife for a younger model? I needed more information. I pulled up LinkedIn and searched for Lily Chen's profile. It was sparse, created only 8 months ago when she'd been hired full-time. Her employment history showed she'd graduated from the local state university with a degree in business administration 2 years ago. Before that, she'd worked retail and food service jobs. Nothing remarkable or noteworthy. But then I noticed something in her education section. She'd attended state university from 2018 to 2022. That timeline didn't match her age. If she was 28 now, she would have been 24 when she graduated. Most people graduate from undergraduate programs at 21 or 22, unless she'd taken time off, or started college late, or was actually older than David claimed. I searched for state universities' graduation records, but they weren't publicly available. I tried searching for her in the university's newspaper archives, thinking maybe she'd been involved in student activities that would give me more information about her background. What I found made my blood run cold. There, in an archived article from March 2019, was a photo of a university fundraising event. And in the background, barely visible but unmistakably present, was a younger version of Lily Chen. But she wasn't alone. She was standing next to David. The article was about a career mentorship program where local business professionals volunteered to advise students. David was listed as one of the mentors, and based on the photo, Lily had been one of his mentees. David had known Lily Chen for over 5 years. He'd been her mentor when she was a college student. He'd watched her graduate, hired her as an intern, then promoted her to a full-time position. And at some point during that 5-year relationship, things had become inappropriate. I sat back from my laptop, trying to process what I'd discovered. This wasn't a whirlwind romance between two adults who'd met and fallen in love. This was a man who'd cultivated a relationship with a much younger woman over years, using his position of power and influence to groom her, and then discarding his wife of 16 years to marry her. But there was something else. The recognition I'd felt looking at Lily's face wasn't just about seeing her in that archived photo. There was another layer to it, another place I'd seen her. I just couldn't remember where. I thought back to the years David had been mentoring students. I'd sometimes attended university events with him, career fairs, and networking dinners and graduation ceremonies. Had I met Lily then? Had we been introduced at some function where she'd been just another face in a crowd of students? I pulled up my photo albums again, and then I found it. In a photo from a graduation ceremony 3 years ago, there was a crowd of students in caps and gowns. I'd taken the picture to capture David speaking at the podium, giving a commencement address to the business school graduates. But when I zoomed in on the audience, there she was. Lily Chen, sitting in the third row, looking up at David with an expression that even then looked like something more than respect for a speaker. I'd been there that day. I'd watched my husband give that speech, proud of his accomplishments and his willingness to volunteer his time to help students. I'd taken this photo, and Lily had been in it, and I'd never noticed her. But that wasn't the recognition I was feeling. There was something else, something more recent. I was missing a piece of the puzzle. I spent the rest of the day going through every photo, every document, every scrap of paper that might connect Lily Chen to my life. I checked my calendar for the past 2 years, looking for any events or appointments that might have overlapped with her. I went through my credit card statements, looking for purchases that might have been made at places where she worked or frequented. And then, as evening approached and I was about to give up for the day, I remembered. 6 months ago, shortly before David filed for divorce, I'd gone to his office to bring him some documents he'd forgotten at home. It was late afternoon, and most of the staff had already left for the day. But as I was walking down the hallway toward his office, I'd passed a young woman leaving the conference room. She'd been crying, her face red and blotchy, her hands shaking as she gathered her things. We'd made eye contact for just a second, and she'd looked at me with such raw emotion that I'd stopped and asked if she was okay. She'd shaken her head and hurried past me without speaking. I'd asked David about it later, and he'd waved it off. Just an employee having a bad day, nothing serious. But it had been serious, because that young woman crying in the hallway had been Lily Chen. And now, looking back with the knowledge I had, I could interpret that moment differently. She hadn't been crying because of work stress. She'd been crying because of her relationship with David. Maybe they'd had a fight. Maybe he'd told her he couldn't leave his wife yet. Maybe she'd been frustrated by the secrecy and the lying. Whatever the reason, I'd seen evidence of their relationship 6 months before David filed for divorce, and I hadn't recognized it for what it was. I'd looked into the face of the woman my husband was cheating with, the woman he would eventually leave me for, and I'd asked her if she was okay. The irony was devastating. That was the recognition I'd been feeling. That brief encounter in the hallway, that moment of eye contact with a crying young woman, my subconscious had remembered her face even when I hadn't consciously connected it to the wedding photo. I pulled up the wedding announcement again, looking at Lily's face with new understanding. This wasn't just some random woman David had met and married quickly. This was someone he'd known for years, someone he'd mentored and employed and eventually seduced. Someone who'd been crying in his office building because their secret relationship was tearing her apart. And I tried to comfort her, not knowing she was sleeping with my husband. The rage that filled me then was unlike anything I'd felt during the divorce. During those months of legal battles and asset division, I'd been hurt and confused and angry at the destruction of my marriage. But this was different. This was the rage of betrayal compounded by deception, of realizing that the life I'd thought I was living had been a complete lie for years. David hadn't suddenly fallen out of love with me. He'd been conducting an affair with his employee, a woman young enough to be his daughter, for at least 6 months and possibly much longer. He'd mentored her when she was a vulnerable college student, hired her when she graduated, kept her close and dependent on him professionally, and then crossed every ethical line imaginable by turning that professional relationship into a personal one. And when it became inconvenient to juggle a wife and a mistress, he'd simply discarded the wife and married the mistress 1 week after the divorce was final. I thought about that crying woman in the hallway and wondered what David had told her to make her that upset. Had he been stringing her along, promising to leave his wife but never doing it? Had she given him an ultimatum? Is that what had finally prompted him to file for divorce? Whatever the truth was, I was certain of one thing: David was a predator. He'd used his position of power to pursue a woman half his age, someone who'd looked up to him as a mentor and professional contact. He'd betrayed me, betrayed our marriage, and betrayed every ethical standard his profession claimed to uphold. And I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man he really was. The next morning, I woke with absolute clarity about what needed to happen. David had spent years crafting a narrative where he was the victim of an unhappy marriage, where he'd bravely ended things and moved on to find happiness with someone new. The timeline of his wedding was designed to make it look spontaneous, romantic even, two people who'd fallen in love and couldn't wait to start their lives together. But I knew the truth now. And truth, I was about to prove, was more powerful than any carefully constructed lie. I started by documenting everything I'd discovered. I created a timeline that began 5 years ago when David first mentored Lily as a college student. I printed out the archived university newspaper article showing them together at the fundraising event. I documented when she'd been hired as his intern, when she'd been promoted to full-time employee. I marked the date 6 months before our divorce when I'd seen her crying in his office hallway. And finally, I noted the date of our divorce and their wedding just 8 days later. Laid out like this, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a whirlwind romance. This was a calculated seduction of a younger, professionally vulnerable woman by her boss and former mentor. Next, I called my divorce attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd helped me through the proceedings. "Patricia, I need to know if there are legal implications for what I'm about to tell you," I said when she answered. "That sounds ominous. What's going on, Rebecca?" I explained everything I'd discovered about David and Lily. The years-long connection, the power dynamic, the timeline that proved their relationship had started while we were still married. "The divorce is finalized," Patricia said carefully when I finished. "So there's no legal recourse for infidelity or misrepresentation at this point. However, if you can prove he was hiding assets or income related to this relationship during the divorce proceedings, we could potentially reopen the financial settlement." "I don't care about more money," I said. "I care about people knowing who he really is." I care about his company understanding that their employee married her boss after he mentored her as a student and then supervised her career. That's an ethics violation, isn't it? Potentially. Most companies have fraternization policies, especially regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. If his company has such a policy and he violated it, there could be professional consequences. How do I report it? You'd need to contact his company's Human Resources Department or Ethics Hotline. But Rebecca, think carefully about this. Once you make that call, there's no taking it back. You'll be opening yourself up to accusations of being vindictive, of not being able to let go. David will paint you as a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge. Let him, I said. I have documentation. I have dates and photos and a clear timeline. The truth speaks for itself. After hanging up with Patricia, I pulled up David's company website and found their employee ethics hotline number. It was designed for reporting workplace violations anonymously. I took a deep breath and dialed. Ethics Hotline, how can I help you? The voice was professional, neutral. I want to report a workplace relationship that violates company policy, I said, between a supervisor and his subordinate. The supervisor is David Morrison in the Business Development Department. The subordinate is Lily Chen, who he directly supervised and has since married. Can you provide details about the relationship and how it violates policy? I laid out the timeline, explaining that David had been Lily's mentor, then intern supervisor, then direct boss. I explained that they'd gotten married 1 week after his divorce was final, which indicated the relationship had been ongoing during her employment. I'm transferring you to a case manager who will document this formally, the operator said. I spent the next 30 minutes providing detailed information to a woman named Sandra who took extensive notes. She asked for documentation, so I offered to email everything I'd compiled. This will be investigated thoroughly, Sandra assured me. If we find evidence of policy violation, there will be consequences. I can't tell you what those might be, but I can say we take these matters very seriously. Good, I said, because what he did wasn't just unethical, it was predatory. After documenting the complaint with his company, I turned to social media. I'd been relatively quiet during the divorce, not airing our dirty laundry publicly. But now I had information that people deserve to know, especially the women in our social circle who might see David and Lily as a romantic success story. I opened Facebook and began typing. A week ago, I received a wedding announcement from my ex-husband of 16 years. He married a woman named Lily Chen, who is 28 years old, 1 week after our divorce was finalized. I was shocked by the timeline and the age gap. But what shocked me more was realizing where I knew her from. Lily Chen was David's intern 4 years ago. She was his mentee when she was still in college, 5 years ago. She has worked under his direct supervision for the past 8 months. She is his employee. And 6 months before he filed for divorce from me, I saw her crying in his office building, visibly distressed about something he later dismissed as work stress. I share this not out of bitterness, but because the timeline matters. Because power dynamics matter. Because people should know that the man they're congratulating for finding love actually cultivated a relationship with someone half his age who was professionally dependent on him, conducted an affair during our marriage, and then married her 1 week after our divorce papers were signed. This isn't a love story. This is an ethics violation. This is a boss marrying his much younger subordinate. This is a man who mentored a college student and turned that mentorship into something inappropriate. I'm sharing this because I wish someone had told me years ago what my husband was doing behind my back. I wish I'd seen the signs. I wish I'd known that the late nights at work and the sudden interest in mentoring students and the defensive reactions when I asked questions were all evidence of betrayal I was too trusting to recognize. If you're considering congratulating David on his marriage, please remember these facts. If you're a woman who's ever been in a professional relationship with a mentor or boss who made you uncomfortable, please recognize this pattern. And if you're someone who values ethics and appropriate workplace conduct, please understand what David Morrison's marriage to his employee really represents. I read it through 3 times, making sure every word was accurate and defensible. Then I clicked post. The response was immediate. Within minutes, comments started appearing. Some were supportive. "Thank you for speaking up. This is awful. I'm so sorry this happened to you." Others were cautious. "Are you sure about this? Maybe there's another explanation." But a few comments made my decision worthwhile. One woman named Jennifer wrote, "I worked with David years ago, and he made inappropriate comments about my appearance and asked me out repeatedly even though I said no. I never reported it because he was senior to me and I needed the job. Thank you for saying what many of us were thinking." Another comment came from someone I didn't know. "I was an intern at his company 3 years ago. He offered to mentor me and then tried to turn it into something personal. When I declined, my internship mysteriously wasn't extended. I always wondered if I was the only one." The pattern was emerging publicly now, confirmation that David's behavior with Lily wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger problem with how he treated younger women in professional settings. My phone started ringing almost immediately. Allison called first. "Beck, I just saw your Facebook post. Are you sure you want this out there publicly?" "I'm certain," I said. "People need to know who he really is." "You're going to get backlash. You know that, right? People are going to say you're bitter and vindictive." "Let them. I have documentation for everything I wrote. The truth is on my side." My mother called next, her voice worried. "Rebecca, honey, I understand you're hurt, but publicly attacking David like this, is that really wise?" "I'm not attacking him, Mom, I'm stating facts. He married his employee 1 week after our divorce. That's not an opinion, it's what happened." "But couldn't you have handled this privately, reached out to him directly?" "I did reach out to him. He lied to me about the timeline. He claimed they didn't start dating until after he filed for divorce, but I have proof they've known each other for 5 years, and she's been working for him for months. He had his chance to be honest. He chose to lie." Within an hour, my post had been shared 47 times. Friends of friends were commenting. People I'd never met were adding their own stories about David or similar experiences with older men in positions of power pursuing younger women. The post was spreading beyond my immediate circle, becoming part of a larger conversation about workplace ethics and power dynamics. Then David called. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was tight with rage. "Take down that Facebook post immediately." "No, you're defaming me. You're making accusations that aren't true. I could sue you for this." "Everything in that post is factually accurate and documented. You did mentor Lily as a student. She did work as your intern and then your employee. We did get divorced and you did marry her 8 days later. Which part is defamatory? You're implying I did something wrong. You're suggesting I had an affair. I'm stating a timeline and letting people draw their own conclusions. If those conclusions reflect poorly on you, perhaps you should examine your own behavior instead of blaming me for exposing it. I never cheated on you. I told you that." "You're lying, David. I saw her crying in your office building 6 months before you filed for divorce. You were having an emotional affair at minimum, and probably a physical one as well. You mentored her as a student, hired her as an intern, promoted her to employee, and married her the moment you legally could. That's not a coincidence, that's a pattern. You're just angry because I moved on faster than you did. I'm angry because you're a predator. You used your position of power to pursue someone half your age who depended on you professionally. That's not romance, David, that's abuse. I'm not having this conversation. Take down the post or my lawyers will contact you about defamation." "Let them. I look forward to discovery, where we can document exactly when your relationship with Lily started and what you told her while we were still married. I'm sure that'll be fascinating." He hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt oddly calm. David had spent our entire marriage controlling narratives, telling me what to think and feel, making me doubt my own perceptions. He'd made me feel like I was crazy for questioning him, paranoid for noticing inconsistencies. But I wasn't crazy. I'd been right all along, and now everyone would know it. Over the next several days, the fallout intensified. David's company launched an investigation into the ethics violation I'd reported. Several other former interns and employees came forward with their own complaints about his behavior. The investigation expanded beyond just his relationship with Lily to examine a pattern of inappropriate conduct with younger women. My Facebook post continued spreading. It was shared over 200 times, reaching people far beyond my social circle. Local media picked up the story, with one reporter contacting me to ask if I'd be willing to discuss workplace ethics and power dynamics in professional mentorship relationships. I agreed to an interview, which appeared in the local newspaper's website under the headline, "When Mentorship Becomes Predatory, Local Woman Speaks Out About Ex-Husband's Marriage to Former Intern." In the interview, I was careful to focus on the facts rather than. I was 23 years old when it started. I didn't understand the power dynamic. I didn't see how he was manipulating me. I thought I was mature enough to handle an older man's attention. I thought our relationship was special and different from the cliches everyone warns you about. He controlled everything. When I could see him, who I could tell, what I could post online, he said it was to protect both of us, but really it was to protect him. I couldn't talk about our relationship with friends or family. I had to lie about where I was going and who I was with. And any time I questioned him or got upset about the secrecy, he'd make me feel like I was being immature and demanding. The day you saw me crying in the hallway was the day I told him I couldn't do this anymore, that I needed him to either leave his wife or end our relationship. He got angry and told me I was being manipulative, that I didn't understand how complicated divorce was, that I was being selfish by giving him ultimatums. I cried all the way home that day, feeling like I'd ruined everything. And then 2 weeks later, he filed for divorce, and suddenly I was the hero of the story. I was the woman who'd given him the courage to leave his unhappy marriage. I was the prize he'd won for being brave enough to end things with you. I believed that narrative until I saw your Facebook post, until I read the comments from other women who'd experienced similar things with David, until I realized that I wasn't special or different. I was just the most recent in a pattern. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to feel sorry for me. I was complicit in hurting you, even if I didn't fully understand what I was doing. But I want you to know that you were right about everything. The timeline, the power dynamic, the manipulation. It was all exactly what you said it was. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. Part of me wants to leave, to admit this was a mistake and try to rebuild my life. But I'm afraid. David controls so much. My job, our living situation, everything. And I'm starting to understand that this is how he keeps women trapped, by making us dependent on him and then making us feel like we have nowhere else to go. Thank you for speaking the truth. Even though it hurt to read, I needed to see it. I needed to understand what had really happened. You probably saved me years of pain by exposing this now rather than letting me figure it out on my own much later. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry. I read the message 3 times, my emotions swinging between anger and sympathy. Lily had participated in the destruction of my marriage, had slept with my husband while he was still my husband, had accepted his lies about our relationship being over. She bore responsibility for those choices. But she'd also been manipulated by a man twice her age who had power over her career and her future. She'd been 23 when he started pursuing her, barely out of college, looking up to him as a mentor and role model. He'd exploited her youth and inexperience and trust. Both things could be true. She'd hurt me and she'd been victimized by David. I wrote back, "Lily, thank you for being honest. I believe you about how it started and how David manipulated you. What he did to you was wrong, and you didn't deserve to be used that way regardless of how things affected me. I want you to know something important. You're not trapped. I know it feels that way, but you have options. Document everything about your relationship with David, especially anything related to how it started when you were his intern. Contact an attorney who specializes in employment law and discuss your options. If David retaliated against you professionally after the relationship ended, that's illegal. If he used his position to pressure you into a relationship, that's sexual harassment. You're young. You have your whole career ahead of you. Don't let David control your future the way he controlled your past. I'm not saying I forgive you for your role in my marriage ending. That's complicated, and I'm still processing it. But I am saying that you deserve better than what David gave you. You deserve a relationship based on equality and mutual respect, not manipulation and power dynamics. If you need resources or references for attorneys, let me know. Despite everything, I don't want to see you trapped in a bad situation. Take care of yourself. Rebecca, I didn't hear back from Lily after that message. But 3 days later, I received a call from David's company's HR department. Ms. Morrison, this is Sandra from the Ethics Investigation Team. I wanted to inform you that our investigation has concluded. We found substantial evidence of policy violations regarding David Morrison's relationship with employee Lily Chen. Mr. Morrison has been terminated from his position effective immediately. What about Lily? I asked. Ms. Chen has resigned from the company. We offered her the opportunity to transfer to a different department with different supervisors, but she chose to leave. We've provided her with excellent references and career counseling resources. Thank you for taking this seriously, I said. Thank you for reporting it. Your information helped us identify a pattern of behavior that we should have caught much earlier. We're implementing new training and oversight for mentor relationships to ensure this doesn't happen again. After hanging up, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. David had faced professional consequences for his actions. He'd lost his job, his reputation was damaged, and the other women he'd targeted had been vindicated. This wasn't just about my personal revenge. This was about justice for everyone he'd manipulated over the years. 2 months later, I was having coffee with Allison when she showed me a Facebook post from Lily. She'd apparently unblocked me or made it public because I could now see her profile. The post was a photo of Lily standing alone on a beach at sunset, wearing casual clothes and looking contemplative. The caption read, "2 months ago, I married someone I thought I loved. Today, I filed for divorce." I'm not ready to share all the details, but I want other young women to know. If someone twice your age tells you that you're mature for your age, that's a warning sign. If someone with power over your career pursues you romantically, that's a red flag. If someone makes you feel like you need to keep your relationship secret from everyone you care about, that's abuse. I was manipulated by someone I trusted. I hurt people I never intended to hurt. I made terrible choices based on lies someone told me about who I was and what I deserved. I take responsibility for my actions, but I also recognize that I was a victim of something I didn't fully understand until it was too late. I'm starting over. I'm rebuilding my career and my life and my sense of self. I'm learning to trust my own judgment instead of letting others define my reality. It's hard and scary, and sometimes I want to give up. But I'm also free. And freedom, I'm learning, is worth the discomfort of starting over. To anyone in a similar situation, it's not too late to leave. It's not too late to rebuild. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve better than manipulation disguised as love. I showed the post to Allison. She left him, I said. Good for her, Allison replied. That took courage. I thought about responding to Lily's post, offering support or solidarity, but I decided against it. She was on her own journey now, learning her own lessons, building her own life. She didn't need me involved in that process. Instead, I focused on my own rebuilding. I'd spent months uncovering David's betrayal, documenting his manipulation, exposing his predatory behavior. That work had been necessary and important, but it had also kept me tied to him and to our failed marriage. Now it was time to let go. I sold the house we'd shared, the one full of memories both good and bad. I moved to a smaller place across town, somewhere that was entirely mine with no connection to David or our life together. I redecorated in colors I loved, filled the space with art that made me happy, created a home that reflected who I was rather than who we'd been as a couple. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the marriage and divorce. I started taking classes in subjects that interested me. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to visit, but David had dismissed as boring or impractical. Slowly, month by month, I rebuilt a life that was authentically mine. A year after the divorce, I ran into David at a local coffee shop. He looked older, his face drawn, his eyes tired. He was alone, hunched over a laptop, wearing clothes that looked like he'd slept in them. He glanced up as I walked past, recognition flickering across his face, followed by something that might have been shame. I nodded acknowledgement and kept walking, not interested in conversation. As I left with my coffee, I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. just a detached observation that the man who'd once controlled so much of my life now had no power over me at all. That absence of feeling was its own kind of freedom. The story of David and Lily and their disastrous marriage became a cautionary tale in our community, discussed at professional development seminars, and used as an example of how not to conduct workplace relationships. David never got another job in his field. His reputation was permanently damaged by the ethics violations and the pattern of predatory behavior that had been exposed. Lily, on the other